Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Heebee JeebeezTV. If you're new here, my name is Ashley and I like to talk about crime, creepy, and unbelievable stories. Now, if that's your thing, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and if you want more content, don't forget to check out my TikTok. It's the same username at Heebee JeebeezTV, and I post there 1 to 3 times a day, quite a large variety of stories from true crime, medical mysteries, the paranormal, basically a lot more of the same kind of content, just in short story format. So if that's your preference, head over there and take a look. So speaking of TikTok, today's video is actually based on a recommendation that was given to me by one of my followers over there on that platform. And it's actually the very interesting, mysterious, and I would definitely say basically an unbelievable story. And it's that of Jose Velazquez, Juan Ramon, and the radio station called Mano Peluda. So without talking too much, let's just get into the story. So this story takes us to El Monte in California, just outside of Los Angeles. And if you don't know where that is, it's right next to Covina, and it takes place over a long span of years. Now, like I was saying, there was a Mexican radio show called Mano Peluda, and that's in Spanish, and in English, it means the hairy hand. And essentially that radio station focused on people's paranormal experiences. It was quite a viral show, especially across California, the LA area, but mostly in Mexico. So what would usually happen on the show is that people would call in with a lot of unusual, strange, paranormal sort of stories. And then the radio host would call on to guest experts, mediums, psychics, and that sort of people that could chime in, lend their opinion to possibly come to a solution for the problem the guest was experiencing, or just to offer their perspective on the entire situation. They also had story times with guests that just wanted to tell about their creepy encounters that they were experiencing. And it was actually one of these stories that this entire video is based on. So the host of this radio show of Mano Peluda was a very famous radio host called Juan Ramon. And he was very well known across Latin America, especially in Mexico and in Mexico City. So on one day, it was 2002, when a guest called into the show with a very strange, unusual story that almost no one believed, but he called into the show that day in order to get some help. So the phone call itself is available on YouTube. It is quite long. It's over an hour long, and it is in Spanish. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any subtitles. If you understand it, go ahead and take a listen. But otherwise, I'm going to go over most of it here on this video. So the caller's name was this guy, Jose Velazquez, and he was telling a story about how when he was just 16 years old, he had made a pact with the devil in exchange for wealth and power.
A la edad de 14 años, mi familia entró en una crisis económica severa. Perdimos cuanto teníamos. Empecé a buscar posibilidades de cómo poder ayudar a la economía de mi familia. Fueron tantas cosas que yo buscaba que en una ocasión, llegaré al punto, señor. Me encontré un libro de brujería, donde decía la forma de impactar con un demonio llamado Lucifugio Rofocale. Sí. Si uno lograba hacer contacto con este demonio, podía pedirle tantísimas cosas como bienes materiales. Mi objetivo principal era, en un principio, tener dinero.
So you see, Jose's family had a very tragic but very common story when it comes to new immigrants that navigate towards America and other countries just for a sense of freedom. So Jose's family, they were newly immigrated to California, and unfortunately, they were drowning in a lot of debt. They were working quite a lot, and no matter how much they worked, it just seems like they could never catch up or progress. Josue and his family, they prayed and prayed for a miracle. They prayed for God to help them, but sadly, their prayers went unanswered. And so this is what prompted Jose to turn to the devil. So when Jose was just 16 years old, he started dabbling in witchcraft, and he attempted to summon demons and the devil by doing multiple types of rituals, but unfortunately, he just had no idea what he was doing. He was still a teenager. He was kind of just, reading out these rituals, practicing witchcraft in hopes that something would manifest for him. And Unfortunately, he did this for 2 years and nothing happened. Then one evening, Jose was getting really tired of trying to manifest a demon. He was really having a hard time dealing with life, and he had basically reached the peak of desperation in his life. So on one particular evening, while he was performing a ritual, he decided that this would be it, that would be the end, and he would attempt to end his own life during the witching hours in hopes that it would be enough of a sacrifice for the magic to work. And if you don't know what the witching hour is, it's said to be between 2 and 3 a.m. because it's kind of like a mockery of when Jesus passed away, and it's said to be when dark spirits are the most active. So in the middle of this ritual, Josue is slowly bleeding out. He's passing away. But just as he was about to close his eyes and seemingly fade into the afterlife, he noticed a very tall, dark shadow appear right in front of him. It was also very tall. He said it was as tall as the ceiling, and it had a very deep, unnatural, and very unsettling voice. Then it spoke to him and it said, "Well, you wanted to see me. Here I am." After that night, it was said that Jose's life completely changed. So at first, the demonic entity started to teach Jose a lot of manipulation tactics. For example, he taught him how to mind control small animals like rodents, cats, and dogs. But it kind of drew the line there for him. He said that he wouldn't give him any more tactics or powers without some sort of sacrifice from Jose. So seeing that this demon that he manifested was initially quite helpful, this made Jose very hopeful for the future, in hopes that, maybe his life was about to finally turn around and that he was finally going to get what he really wanted. However, when it came to the point of discussing money with this demon, the demon told him that he needed a blood sacrifice. The bigger the ask, essentially, the bigger the sacrifice needed to be. And that left Jose with the decision about who he wanted to sacrifice. And unfortunately, it needed to be a human. Essentially, this demon was putting Jose in a very difficult situation, because essentially this meant that Jose had to pick a family member to sacrifice, because those were the only people that truly mattered to him. And surprisingly, Jose didn't really hesitate in who to choose. He had actually opted for his grandmother, and he would later go on to explain that he chose her because she was already old, she had already lived a full life, and it wasn't like he was taking much away from her. Which to me, don't even get me started. I would never do that to my grandmother, but this is the path that he chose to go down. So with a target in mind, he set out to execute his sacrifice. So on the phone call, Jose goes on to tell Juan that he had chosen his grandmother and that he waited until she had fallen asleep. He had actually chosen to give her some sleeping medication to make the entire thing easier. So he waits till she falls asleep, goes into her room, and that's when he brutally dismembers her. After the deed had been carried out, any evidence of the crime had been wiped away by the demonic entity, and Josue made it very clear that he basically did absolutely nothing to clean up this mess, that it all went away on its own. And just as the entity had promised Jose, he was flooded with an immense amount of wealth and power. And he was also given this golden ring that he had to wear at all times. However, he thought that this was going to be super fun. He thought he had finally gotten his wish, but unfortunately for him, it was not all rainbows and unicorns. There were significant consequences to making a deal with the devil. So he goes on to say on this phone call about how money was making his life so much better, that he could basically get whatever he wanted, that he had almost no trouble getting what he wanted either. And he had to put in basically minimal effort to do anything. For example, he was able to land a great career without even finishing high school. He was able to manifest money in a single day. However, there was a caveat. The spirit told him that whatever amount of money he was able to manifest on any particular day, the entire sum of that money had to be spent that very same day. If he didn't do this, the spirits of the underworld would basically torment him all day and all night. But that wasn't it. There was something else. He was not allowed to use any of his money to help anyone, including his family, which is literally the entire reason he had done this deal with the devil, because he wanted someone or something to help him and his family live a better life. Of course, at the beginning, Josue tells Juan that he did try to help his family with the money at the beginning, but basically immediately terrible things started to happen to him. He would suffer these vicious and brutal attacks from these demons as punishment, and he even went on to describe one of them, and it's very terrifying. He said that one of them appeared to him in physical form, and it was at that point that he realized that he had truly made a terrible mistake. So this demon that manifested to him in physical form appeared as a woman. However, she had very long hair, she had a white dress on, but the scary part to him was that she had absolutely no sign of a lower body, so it was basically like she was just floating. I don't know why, guys, but I am getting the chills while I'm filming this story. I'm not sure if it's because I'm talking about these things, but definitely giving me the heebie-jeebies. Okay, so back to the story. So anytime Jose would attempt to do anything good with his money, this entity would appear to him, and then she would just start attacking him very violently. For example, there was one time when Jose had actually been out shopping and he crossed paths with a homeless man. Out of the goodness of his heart, he decided to give this man some extra money because he was not able to finish spending all of his money on that particular day. So he starts heading back home, and literally as soon as he gets home, he sees this demonic entity waiting for him right inside his house. And as soon as he walks in, it starts demanding him why he gave away his money and then starts attacking him. But these brutal attacks and taunts and mental anguish that he was going through wasn't it. Josue's appearance also began to change. He noticed that his facial features started to change. They were kind of shifting very slightly. So he didn't see a huge difference right away, but over time, he said that he could barely recognize himself when he looked in the mirror. Then it escalated. It got to the point where other people started noticing, and he said that even strangers he had never met yet had a very hard time looking him in the eye. Then towards the end of the call, Jose is heard pleading to Juan, asking him for help, that he was absolutely terrified of these demons and that he knew that they would torment him for speaking out and looking for help. Juan then tells him that he's going to help Jose in any way he can, and he actually tells him that he's going to contact a pastor to intervene. Then the call gets abruptly cut off and the connection gets lost. But just like how Juan promised, he called a pastor, and it was also a friend of his named Roberto Guaso. And he gave him Jose's contact info and asked him to please reach out to him in order to free him of the demonic entities that plagued him. A little while later, both Juan and the pastor called Jose on a three-way call. They wanted to check in on him and see how he was doing. However, during that call, it took a very dark turn. Josue almost immediately tells him that he was no longer just being taunted by this one woman entity, that he was now constantly being plagued by 4 entities, both physically and emotionally. Jose then pauses during the phone call, and he said it was because the demon had arrived and was now sitting right behind him, watching him. He then pauses and took a moment to light a candle, but as he was doing this, Juan recalls hearing these whimpering sounds coming from Jose's line of the phone call, and he said that it sounded like he was basically crying but trying not to be too loud. Then Jose tells him something terrifying. He says that this entity is now sitting directly in front of him and is staring him down while holding a reversed crucifix with an eyeball in it. The vibe of this entire thing was that the entity was now threatening him, and it told Jose that whenever it saw this inverted cross, it basically meant that his death was coming to him. Then at this point, Juan says that he heard Jose's cries get louder and louder, and there was basically no mistaking it for the fact that Jose was definitely scared and crying on the phone at this point. We would later find out that whatever was there with Jose viciously stabbed him using this crucifix in the torso. Now, it's unknown whether or not it was actually something paranormal that did this to Josue or whether he had done this to himself. But regardless of the situation, he was taken to the hospital where Juan would go visit him several days later. During that visit to the hospital, Jose tells Juan that he's going to take his recommendation and the pastor's recommendation and head off to a monastery somewhere in California to get some real professional help in hopes of finally getting rid of these demons. So of course, Juan, being this famous radio host, he had a lot of people listening to the show that night. He also had colleagues that were there. So people did ask him what he thought about the show. And he would later go on to say in different interviews and conversations that he thought that this at first was just a joke. Someone was calling in and trying to scare him. But he said that he quickly realized that something was very off. During this phone call with Jose, he said that he remembered the entire room going very, very cold and that he was just overcome with this impending feeling of doom. But after he visited Jose at that hospital a few days after their phone call, he had unfortunately lost contact with him. But he figured that everything had worked out since the pastor was now helping him. And for the most part, it did turn out to be true, but things quickly changed once again. Jose would go on to recover from his injuries, and he did go on to live what most people would say was a normal life. And he even went on to college and studied to become a bacteriologist or a microbiologist. Then we fast forward to almost a decade later in 2011. Jose then contacted Juan and told him that he wasn't fully free yet. He said that he still had one big problem, and it was the gold ring that he was still wearing. He told him that he needed to be able to remove this gold ring in order to finally be free. Juan was taken by surprise at this phone call because he thought that the entire thing had been resolved, but he also was no longer working at the radio station. He was no longer the host of La Mano Peluda, and that he was actually the host of a new TV show called Extra Normal, and this show was actually based in Mexico City. However, he was interested in what Jose had to say, so he told them that they would meet up and talk about what happened. So because Juan was now the host of this new paranormal show, they did a lot of sort of paranormal investigations and interviews and all that, and this was also quite popular in Mexico. He took a very big interest in Jose's story, and he even pitched it to his producers because after all, it would have made great content for them. Then surprisingly, the pitch was approved and plans started to be made in order for Juan to meet Jose along with a cameraman and a reporter. So they tell Jose, yes, okay, we're going to go film the show. It was approved. Where do you want to meet? But there was something very off. Jose would not reveal to them the location of their meeting until the day they were supposed to meet. So the day they're supposed to meet, the rest of the men were in a separate van while Jose was talking to them on the phone, telling them that they needed to meet near a body of water. And the closest to them at this point was one called Lake Texcoco, which was located in Mexico City. Now, for those who don't know, Lake Texcoco was where the Aztecs built one of their ancient villages called Tenochtitlan, which was actually their capital city on an island on this body of water. Now, at the present time, this lake is essentially almost all dried up, but a portion of it still remains in Mexico City. So when they see each other, everyone on Juan's team notices something very off about Josue almost immediately. And I'll show you guys here a picture of what he was wearing that day. The men all said that he was wearing a black suit with some sort of animal skin around his neck, and he was also using a bone as a walking cane or some sort of staff. So once they were on the boat, Juan immediately asks him, hey, what's the deal with what you're wearing? It's a little bit weird. But Jose tells him that it's for protection. Then the interview begins, but a few minutes into their conversation, Jose begins to violently convulse. And I'll put a short clip of the interview here so you guys can see what I'm talking about.
La desmedida ambición de Josué era el oscuro deseo que lo impulsaba a querer tener contacto con los seres de oscuridad. ¿Cómo fue este primer encuentro con la oscuridad?
Sentir las ganas de hacer cosas malas, las ganas de... Ay, se me subió.
Pronto Josué estaba recibiendo ataques de los seres malignos que lo rodeaban.
Se cerró eso a mí me causa que me falta el aire.
During the breaks where he had control of his body, he would tell Juan that the spirits were still tormenting him. By the end of their visit, Jose promised Juan that he would no longer practice black magic and that he would finally visit a Yoruba priest to cleanse himself of this evil. Now, if you don't know, a Yoruba priest is a grand priest stemming from the Nigerian culture. And in Mexico, there's also a sect that combines Yoruba practices with Catholic ones, which creates a new concept called Santeria. And they're known for cleansing spirits, illnesses, curses, and so on. So the men all part ways after this interview, thinking that that would be it. They were finally finished with this, but it was far from that. A few days later, Juan mysteriously got extremely sick and strange things started happening in his home. He would tell friends and family, even co-workers, that things would start moving on their own in the house. He would hear strange noises. His bed would even shake violently in the middle of the night. And he said that he would feel a cold breeze behind his head, even though all the doors and the windows were completely shut. Then something very unexpected happened. On March 29th, 2011, Juan Ramon passed away due to a stomach bacteria called peritonitis. The cameraman that had joined them that day had been hospitalized for a hernia, and the reporter that was also with them on that evening tragically passed away in a very unexpected car accident. But that wasn't it either. Pastor Roberto Guazo, who had helped out Jose all those years ago, also passed away a week after Juan. So this immediately got people talking. What was the deal here? There was definitely something creepy going on. So of course, with so many coincidences and unbelievable stories surrounding these mysterious passings, it was only a matter of time before people started talking. And there's also the fact that Mexicans and Latin America, the population of these countries tend to be extremely superstitious. I would say maybe like 90% of the population believes in the paranormal and the afterlife. There is so much Latin American folklore that has to do with the afterlife. So I am definitely not surprised that people have gone absolutely crazy trying to pick this story apart and find out the truth. So one of these theories is that some people speculate that Jose actually sacrificed Juan for his own life and potentially even for his freedom from these demons. Some of the things that people have pointed out are, what are the chances that Juan suddenly passes away a very short amount of time after meeting Jose after 10 years? Or the fact that he died from a stomach bacteria, which was a microbacteria. But then you also put together the fact that Jose had become a microbiologist. So was there some sort of connection there? This theory, although it has not been proven, it does make a little bit of sense if you think about it, because it's suggested that Jose secretly lured out the men to a secret location to perform some sort of satanic ritual in order to be granted his freedom. In the video that I showed you guys earlier, you can see that he's using animal parts, both the skin and the bone. It's the middle of the night. They're on a body of water in an ancient location. And then he starts shaking, or some would even say that he was performing a ritual. So let me know what you guys think about that. Was he performing some sort of secret ritual without telling the rest of the men about what he was doing in order to, essentially give these demons another blood sacrifice in exchange for his freedom? After the call that was originally made back in 2002, listeners across Mexico called into the radio station telling them that they were all experiencing some very strange events at home. One man claimed to have heard whispers throughout his home for weeks on end. Another woman claimed that while she was listening to the show, her radio just completely started freaking out and basically had a mind of its own while flipping from channel to channel. Other people said that things in their house would move, or that they would just have this very creepy feeling being at home, like they were constantly being watched. As for Jose, not much is known about what happened to him after. There were a couple interviews that were done with him where he was asked about the mysterious passings of these men, and he just went on to say that he had absolutely nothing to do with it. But you know, a lot of people don't believe him. They think that he probably did sacrifice these guys in order for his freedom. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think that the story is completely fake? Is it true? Are parts of it true? Do you think he sacrificed these guys in order for his freedom? Let me know what you guys think. And if you have any other case suggestions, of course, leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to check out my TikTok if you guys are into more creepy crime and unbelievable content. The link is in my description box. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you guys enjoy this type of content. I really do love making these episodes for you guys. So all your support is definitely appreciated. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.